Welcome, everyone. I am Tammy,
And I'm Tanya.
and this is the Child Psych Podcast.
We are psychologists, the co founders of the Institute of Child Psychology, and most importantly, mums.
Yeah, so today we are here with Patty Whitfler and Tasha Shore. They are authors of one of our favorite parenting books called Listen. And it's one of probably depending if you have littles or not at home, like really tiny ones, it's in my top 10 books, especially for discipline when you've got little ones. And we use your tools religiously. So we're going to talk about those tools. Patty is the mother of two sons and the founder of the nonprofit organization Hand in Hand Parenting. The focus of her life's work has been on teaching and supporting parents. In 1989, Patty founded the nonprofit Hand in Hand. As director, she wrote The Approach for Parenting. We'll try that. As the director, she wrote the Listening to Children series and over 60 articles on the principles and benefits of this approach to parenting. She has also spoken to parents around the world. Patty has two grown sons that live in Palo Alto, California. Tasha Shore brings her burst of energy and optimism to parenting. She's an expert at simple solutions to what feel like overwhelmingly complicated problems. A sought-after coach, author, educator, and speaker, Shore is committed to creating lasting change in families and in the world by supporting parents to care for themselves. Shore uses the 5 hand-in-hand parenting tools to support parents of young boys through coaching and live virtual courses via her website, parentingboyspeacefully.com. Welcome.
Welcome. Well,
Thank
Patty
you.
and Tasha, we've already mentioned that what we love about your work is your 5 tools. So I think that we should start there. Could you tell our listeners about your tools?
Sure. I'll start. We basically, children and grown-ups, people of all ages, function best when they feel safe and connected to others. Feeling connected helps you live longer. Feeling connected makes you smarter. Feeling connected grounds you during stressful times. We human beings were, evolved because we could connect, and connection has turned out to be absolutely vital to our mental and physical health. And particularly in childhood, when children are vulnerable, feeling connected is really vital. Children do not thrive if they don't have someone who sees them, feels them, cares about them, is delighted to be with them. And what these tools do is they're grounded in the act of listening to someone else, because listening is a very powerful connector of human beings across all the age groups. A 90-year-old grandma can listen to a newborn baby and make a huge difference in that baby's life, because her attention is there. Her caring comes through non-verbally, but basically a baby's limbic system and a young child's limbic system, the social emotional center of their brain, is designed and very, very delicately and accurately picks up whether someone can pay attention, whether they are paying attention, whether their caring is part of that attention. And when children have that sense of being cared for and seen, they can use their minds to learn and grow and thrive. So the listening is it's the core of the work that we do, both with parents and with children. It's not that easy. Listening is not cultivated in almost any of the cultures that you see in the modern world. It has been cultivated in certain cultures before, but you don't see it much now. And so but it's a simple thing to do. Simple and powerful. Makes a huge difference in parenting. And so our tools are one tool for parents to use to build listening relationships so that they have someone listening to them about all the ins and outs and ups and downs of parenting on as frequent a basis as they can arrange it. And so we call that listening partnerships, where two people exchange listening. You don't have to be a professional to do it very, very well. But you do have to follow certain guidelines, which take you out of conversation and into paying attention and trusting the other person's intelligence while they struggle and sort through and feel bad and, whatever they do. If someone is listening, good things will come of it. Progress will come of it sooner or later. So that's listening partnerships for grown-ups, and that's how we teach people to use listening at that end of the age scale. And for children, we have 4 tools, parent-to-child tools that help children get their daily dose of connection, or even their hourly dose of connection that is needed to keep them learning and growing and shedding the tension from the moments that don't go well for them. And there are many moments like that every day for every child. We cannot make life perfect for children. So, given that we can't make life perfect for them, these listening tools keep moving things over to the place where children feel safe, the place where they feel cherished, the place where they feel like somebody's backing them. And the listening tools, I'll just describe them briefly, and then as we go on, I think, the illustrations will come up. And so the first one is special time. It's really the tool to use first. It's the tool to use when your child is off track, their behavior's going nuts. It's the tool to use when there's extra stress in the family. All you do to do special time is you sort of try to get your own burdens off your shoulders for 10 minutes, and you tell your child, hey, I've got 10 minutes. I'll do whatever you want to do. What do you want to do? And you bring some life and some interest, and you bring an open mind to it. You're not like, and we can either read this book or this book, but we're going to read a book because it's special time. You do not direct what happens at special time. You direct when it happens and how long it's for. And special time has a beginning and an end. We're going to start now and we're going to end when the little beeper goes off. And so that children can kind of calibrate to what it feels like to have connection coming in. And after about 6 months of using special time as a regular practice, children can notice that they're going off track. They're wanting to grab something from their little sister. And they go, Daddy, can I have some special time? Because they know that getting reconnected is going to keep them from, going haywire. They have.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
I don't know where you came up with 6 months. It might take 6 months, but definitely I've seen it help so much more quickly than that.
Yeah. Yep. We used your tool because Tanya and I have we had kids around the same time. I have a blended family though, and so we have 3 kids that are 6 and under. And I've read your book before I had kids. And in our home, we use your tool for special time. And my husband and I say, so-and-so, like whichever child it is, bucket's empty. And then we know that's cue for special time. Like that in our home is the cue. And we really used your book to help cultivate like the steps for that. Just instead of it being like a movie or something, like we're play therapists. So we know child-led play is so important, but this just gave that, I don't know, something structure around it of being guidelines for us, even as parents, because it's therapeutic, but it's not therapy. It's not a play therapy session, but it's just really, and it's so doable, this skill of special time. And we're not asking parents to do it. You're not asking them to do it for 2 hours. It's 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah. No. But I think one of the most, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think like, Patty, what you were pointing out is so important because it's really that the child's system senses that things are off and that they feel better and can function better after they get that dose of connection, so that they're able to actually ask for it from their end, right? So like the bucket's empty from the parent's end, like that's great. And then from the child's end, to have a child be able to recognize even before they can probably verbalize what's going on. I mean, I'm not saying they're not verbal, but they're not going to say, gosh, I'm feeling pretty bad today. So-and-so stole my snack and that really made me upset. And they're not going through all of that, but they can sense that they're feeling bad. And they know that when they get special time, they feel better. So they'll say, Mommy, can I have special time? And it's amazing. It's empowering for the kids.
Yeah.
What I love about that is it's just a skill that's transferable across the ages. So, when they're little, it's special time. But what we're hoping is that when they move into adulthood in different ways, they can ask that from their partner. So instead of getting into conflict, they now have those skills that you've put in place.
Once I went to visit my younger son when we had just gone to university, and it was my first trip down there, and I met his roommates, and I took them out to lunch, and I took him out to dinner, and we walked around, and I don't know, he showed me around. And finally on Sunday afternoon, we were walking down a hill, and he looks at me and he goes, "Mom, when are we going to do special time?"
I love that.
Oh, that's
Because he just
beautiful.
wanted that, that real direct attention, not kind of, oh, we're having a nice time looking around the world together. It's like, yeah. So
Oh, that's beautiful.
it's, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the first tool. Second tool is what we call play listening, which is really grown-ups noticing what allows a child to laugh, and then promoting that laughter without any tickling or forcing anything, but you just kind of, once when I ran an infant toddler center, and once while I was in with the toddlers, I walked across the room and I tripped on a little fold in the carpet. And one of the children saw me trip and laughed. And I thought, well, that's interesting. All these kids are working on the skill of walking and they're falling down a lot. So I said, oh my gosh. So play listening is in a situation like that going, oh, I've got to walk across this room again. I know I can do it, and then trying to walk across the room and pretend tripping again. And then two kids laughed. And I go, why can't I walk across this room? I'm going to try this again. I know I can do it. I'm a good walker. And tripping again. And pretty soon, all 8 toddlers were laughing and running across the room and falling down intentionally. And it was this riot of laughter and running and falling, and it was all good. And just all of this tension from the effort to walk was just rolling off in laughter. So that's play listening. It's like just capitalizing without tickling on what lets children laugh and helping that go. Because laughter is also a very powerful safety builder and connector of people across you don't even have to speak the same language. If you can get laughing together, you will feel like that person is your best friend, fairly quickly.
Yeah, and we bring those stress levels right down with laughter too.
Yeah, and we'll talk about these a little more later. And then setting limits, which is absolutely vital in parenting. Children really need limits because they go off track, and they don't want to be off track. They don't want to be calling somebody else names, or throwing their food on the floor, or jumping up and down and refusing to go to bed. It's not fun for them to feel yucky inside and then do those things. And setting limits gives a child the chance to offload the bad feelings that are driving the off-track behavior. And we follow that tool, but basically you just try not to bring your own heated emotions into setting limits. It's like, nope, can't let you do that, sweetie. It really is time for bed. And the fourth parent-child tool is what we call stay listening, which is bringing your attention and your warmth to your child when they are having really big negative emotions. So they're crying because they don't want to go to bed, and you bring your eye contact and maybe some gentle touch, and I know it's hard, but it's time to go to bed. And you leave time for what is a healing process. It's like as the negative emotions come out in tears or tantrums or sweating and struggling, your warmth and caring goes in. Basically, the negative emotions coming out makes room in their system for the good stuff. The more they can cry, the closer they're going to feel to you afterwards. And it doesn't look like anything's happening there. It looks like it's a very quiet power that you have supporting your child through bad feelings. But boy, that quiet power can change a child's whole life around. It can change a typically aggressive or a typically timid child all the way around in a very short period of time, just listen instead of try to make them better somehow. So that's stay listening. Those are the tools, and
Beautiful.
they're meant to work together. It's like if you just do stay listening, it's not gonna help you raise a healthy child. If you just do play listening and it's all laughter and no limits, it's not gonna, things are gonna go awry. It's like all of these five, and if you try to do these tools without getting some emotional support yourself, you're going to be kind of wooden at it. And parents, especially right now, need a lot of emotional support. It's such a hard job in our society that wants to pull their attention away from connection and onto devices over and over and over again. And so it's a grabby culture, and listening really helps us center ourselves and know other people deeply, our children, our partners, our friends, our listening partners.
It's beautiful.
I want to add something. So we've got this kind of a recap. We have the partnership, like listening partnerships is finding like a friend or someone to talk to and truly listening to what they have to say in their parenting struggle is one of the highlights you talk about with the partnership, that listening partnership. Then we have special time, play listening, limits, and stay listening. So my favorite tool other than special time is the play listening. And I just want to give you, I learned these from you guys. I just like to be clear in my home, is that when I want cooperation, particularly from my son, who is very boisterous and very active, is using laughter instead of like limits or, discipline, is using that connection, that oxytocin, that piece to get him from point A to point B. So like if I want him to brush his teeth and get to the bathroom, we have a race. And there's this really important part where, sometimes I beat him. I usually let him win, but like it always feels like it's neck and neck. And if I want him to do something, so that laughter, we do that to get to the car, like racing to him. And I also think from your book too, this one play listening tool that I love is when I couldn't get him dressed in the morning, I would fumble around and I would try to get dressed with his clothes, except I would put his shirt on my foot and I'd put the sock on top of my head, and I would pretend like I didn't know how to get dressed. And he would laugh, and he'd want to show me how to get dressed. It's just being very silly about it and being the one who didn't know how to do it. And then he took control, and after he's laughed, like there's that cooperation that would come from the laughter and the silliness. And I just feel for little ones, these tools you guys give in your book, it melts away at the opposition, especially with little ones under 5 that we so desperately need than just coming down on them. And I'm rigid. The boss and you have to do it this way. Yeah. There's a time and place for limits. But what I love about your book is it talks about how to connect and then redirect them in using laughter and using silliness instead of just being like discipline strategies. Actually is a discipline strategy, but it's way more fun.
Yep.
Can I say a little something about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So play listening, I think, is probably one of the most challenging tools for parents to learn. And one of the places that we can get kind of stuck or confused is that we don't realize that the power in play listening really is about the laughter and the healing of fears that comes as a result of the release of the laughter. And so we can sometimes use it as like a way to coerce our child into doing something, or like, we can use it as like a means to an end in a very sort of linear kind of a way, forgetting that it's the laughter that we're going for. So we want to just be really clear that we, this example that you gave about the getting your child dressed is so great, because what you're doing is you're saying, hey, I'm noticing that when I put my sock on my head, it engenders laughter from my child, right? And when he laughs, he feels a little bit lighter. There's a little bit less rigidity. He's a little bit more flowy. and moving towards cooperation. And then I put, the pants on my shoulder and he laughs a little bit more and he moves a little bit more towards cooperation. But it's not like we're like forcing him to cooperate. We're noticing what's getting in the way of him being able to cooperate and offering an opportunity for the healing to happen so that he can cooperate. Does that make sense? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, it's a beautiful reframe because unfortunately, I think I probably use it more as being like, I need to get this done in the morning. And it works. So I've been using this for years and it works pretty much without fail every time. So I've been like, I love this strategy. But of course, then I think it overflows into other activities throughout the day. We've kind of set him up for feeling connected, which allows him to navigate the world in that grounded place. So it's not just about that moment, it's that carryover.
It's a connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I like to think about is like, is our behavior is changing over time, right? So if we're, if you're saying, oh gosh, maybe I'm using this as kind of like a means to an end, a way to get things done, a way to get him to do things, like what you'll notice is that the behavior isn't getting better, right? Like I'm using this every time we have to go to the car, I'm doing the same thing. And if you're noticing that, then I think the shift to make is to focus on the connection, right? Because one of the things that sometimes gets missed is that when it is the connection that allows the shift in behavior, it is the feeling seen that allows the child to say, oh yeah, let me just grab my shoes or whatever, I'll put them on in the car, right? And do different next time, I guess is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So there's the in the moment, and then there's the bigger picture of how are things going.
Beautiful. And there's there's also, it's like once a child is laughing, even if you have, engineered a race to the bathroom to get ready for school, it's like we sometimes are focused so much on our children that we forget to enjoy that moment. And the delight of a parent, it's like there is nothing better to a child than to see their parent lighting up with laughter and really enjoying the moment, enjoying the contest, enjoying the creativity of finding a way to get there second by just a hair, and the child is feeling victorious. It's like, so it's for us too. It's really, the play listening it's creative, it's fun, and there's nothing better than having your child delighted with you and getting to delight in them as they do this. So it's really, it's not just I'm the parent and I'm doing a good job. It's like, I'm loving this relationship, and that's savoring the moment with them.
Yeah, it's the delight. Patty and Tasha, when we put all of these tools in place, so those sensible limits, the laughter, connection, really listening to our kids, taking care of ourselves, what are some of the outcomes that we see?
Well, I've been at this I sort of was one of the developers of this approach a long time before I started Hand in Hand. So I've seen the children we started working with way back when we didn't know anything about the power of these tools, didn't have the language for them. We just thought, listening to one another was helping us as parents. So how do you listen to children? And we didn't know anything when we started. And the children we were working with are now turning 50 or a little over 50. So we've seen 50 years. And
that's me.
Yeah, Tasha grew up. Her mom knew me, and
that's amazing.
Yeah,
so full circle.
You want to say, Tasha, both you and your sons? Yeah.
No, finish your story. Unless you want me to share.
No. What we've noticed is that when children get, regular special time and regular, limits that are reasonable and set without a whole lot of firepower on the grown-up side, emotional firepower, and stay listening so that they have opportunities to really unload the uncomfortable feelings from times that didn't go well. Um, they do a lot of emoting in the early years. It's like the more you listen, the more they're crying, and the more they want to play, and the more they want your attention, because it's nourishing stuff, and they know they need it. They know it's good for them. So their instincts are, give me more, give me more. And so parenting is a lot of work early with these tools. However, it feels better and better because you see your child emerging from behavioral rigidities that don't make life easy. And by the time they get into grade school, somewhere, depending on who the child is and how much adversity they've been through, somewhere in grade school, they they become more and more of a leader in their class. They become more and more the child that children from various kinds of backgrounds gravitate to. Um, they become more and more resilient, and they keep needing listening time from you. They keep, bringing up reasons that they really need to cry or reasons they really go off track. And but once they get into adolescence, it's like they have their big emotional projects that they haven't finished in early childhood. Those come up. But what happens is that in general, they don't reject their parents. They want to be around their parents. They tell their parents everything that's going on in their lives. Not every day, but yeah. And so the parents need those listening partnerships to keep working on, my child has a friend who's thinking about suicide, and that friend is talking to my child, and he's rocking and with all this responsibility, and he feels like he can't tell anybody because it's all confidential. What do I do? What do I do? And so there's a lot of emotional growth and a lot of wisdom that is cultivated through these big challenges. But in general, especially if you roughhouse with children, especially if you provide a lot of physical play and laughter, they become very interested in justice, interested in standing up for other people who can't quite stand up for themselves. They know themselves really well, and they are amazingly resilient. One of the children that we worked with early was in her first year of grad school in communications at a major university when a car rear-ended her, and she got a really bad whiplash and had just a monstrous headache that didn't go away for, I think it was constant for a year and a half or 2 years. She could not study, she could not read, she could not think. And she's in a graduate program. So she used listening partnerships to cry and cry and cry about the emotional part of having her life absolutely upended in this, totally unpredictable way, and sought out various therapies for brain injury. And it took her 3 years, but she got right back into grad school, got her PhD. She's, teaching at a major university. It's been social justice work almost all the way along that she has done research on. And she's just starting to teach hand-in-hand parenting. I think we're going to certify her as an instructor this week or next. So
it's incredible.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of resilience because kids know what helps them heal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Also, sorry, go ahead.
So what I'm hearing there, Patty, is that these kids feel seen and heard and valued, and then that helps them through all of those different developmental stages.
Yes, yes.
And I wanted to add that I think what doesn't happen is the fears that parents often come to us with when they first start practicing these tools, right? Is my kid going to be spoiled? Or, if I move towards him with connection when he's misbehaving, aren't I just going to see more of the bad behavior? These are the fears that parents have when they first are introduced to the hand-in-hand parenting tools. and they just do not come to fruition. That is not what happens, because that's not how our brain works. We need to feel seen, felt, feel connected to be able to function well. And that's true for our kids too. So, punishing or withholding love as a result of bad behaviors, and is not is the exact opposite, right? It is exactly the opposite of what they need to be able to change how they're behaving.
Well, I think too, it's this idea that kids often, not always, but often act out because they're disconnected.
Yeah.
And so it's saying like the reason why kids lose control of their bodies, why they, some of it's obviously developmental. Young children just don't have impulse control. But a lot of times kids have so many meltdowns, or they act out, or they become oppositional because they're lacking that connection from the parent. They're trying in the best way they know how to say, I need you right now, but I lack the skill to tell you that. So I'm going to hit my brother. I'm going to do these things. I have this meltdown. And if we met the need and got ahead of it and met the need for connection first, we wouldn't see the same kinds of behaviors. It's the antidote, but you just have, if we can provide it first.
Yeah. I think one of the big mindset shifts that's really important for parents to make is this mindset shift from, my kid won't do X or won't stop doing X, to they can't.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we adopt that belief that a child is doing the best that they can always, which translates into he can't do better than this right now, which translates into, okay, well, if this is the best he can do and it's not good enough, then me, adult with the fully developed brain, needs to step in with a plan. That's empowering. That turns into empowerment for a parent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important to remember that our kids want to do well. I think it's Ross Green, right, who says that kids do well when they can, and that is absolutely true. But it doesn't do much as a meme. But if we really believe it and internalize it and act as a parent in such a way that shows our child that we know that they do well when they can, and that when they can't, we're here to help, that's when we get to help sort of develop these emotionally intelligent beings, and they grow up into these amazing humans.
Well, won't feels very shaming and dead end, whereas can't is curious. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Why not? How do we help them?
Yeah. I think it was Jen Alexander in one of her books wrote, is just to ask yourself, is this a can't or a won't? Because that, like, to pause before we decide to discipline, or we are more intentional about how we act when, and how we respond, I should say, when our kids are saying that they need us. And I think we automatically are taught. I think that's just the message of her parenting, is that kids, I think this came from behaviorism, is children are manipulated. They need to be controlled and showed who's boss. And if you don't get this under control, they're never going to get into the right college, and they're never going to have friends. And there's a lot of fear mongering with parenting. And we have to remember that kids are just looking for, their connection seeking with just the nature of human beings is to look for connection.
And what we see with parents is that when someone is regularly listening to them, and they have a particular reaction, like, well, he just won't do this and he's trying to get my goat, and I feel manipulated by my child, or those kinds of negative interpretations of why a child might go off track. As we listen to the parent, we just ask a simple question. How were your parents treating you when you were 4 years old? If the child is a 4-year-old, and oftentimes we see that the ways that we were treated at the age that our child is now are kind of being projected onto the child. It's like the interpretations of a child as bad are, we got those interpretations, we internalized them, and we can't remember it easily. But when our child does something that our parents would have disapproved of, we kind of project their attitudes on our child, thinking this is the child's problem, because that's what happened to us. And when we can't think of anything, when we can't be generous towards our children, because of all the pressures that are on parents right now. But in particular, all those pressures kind of push the buttons of, emotional memory that's kind of stuck in there, that you just never had a chance to heal from your parents' explosions at you, or they're calling you a selfish brat, or, whatever it was that they did. That's what comes up in your head when your child goes off track. And so the listening partnerships is how we try to, sweep things out in there so that we're kinder to ourselves, and healing by laughing or crying or talking about the places where we got hurt as children. And the more regularly we can do that, the more space we have to really relax and see what's going on and figure out a tool to use and think, maybe I don't have a bad child. Maybe I just have a disconnected child. But that thought cannot occur if no one's listening to you and you're struggling all by yourself all day long, every day.
So for parents who feel very isolated and they say, like, I don't have a big friend group, I have to work from home all the time, my life's too busy, like, what would you say to them? Because actually we've been asked that before. And I know for a while there with your organization, there was kind of some partnerships that they could find. What would you tell parents about finding someone to establish this kind of relationship with? Where to go, or how to start? How do you start? Yeah.
Yeah. It's not, in a way, it's not easy, because a listening partnership is not a known thing in our society. After we've been around for another decade or two, we're hoping that will shift. But right now so one easy way is to come to one of the parenting groups that's led by a hand-in-hand instructor. And you can find those on the events part of our webpage. And another way is to take the listening partnerships class. We have a self-guided video about how to listen. And if you come to the parent club, even just for a month, you can find several hundred other parents who are wanting to get better and better at using this approach with their children, and really wanting to start listening partnerships. So we do have, sort of that forum where you can get pointers on which tool to use when and how to use it, and what happens when it seems like it didn't work. You can actually get help and guidance online quickly in a
and
private
that's
network.
That's through handinhandparenting.org.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And
I've actually
Tasha,
sent parents there.
Yeah.
So
it's a skill.
glad.
It's a skill. Yeah.
And Tasha, if parents are wanting to focus on parenting boys, what do you say to this question?
Oh, well, I mean, I run a membership called the Playhouse, and that's also a place where we talk about listening partnerships, and people, hook up for listening partnerships. But what I was going to say actually is that you could also read that chapter in Listen in the book, because let's say you don't. Okay, let me back up for a second. Listening partnerships, as weird as it sounds, tend to work better when you're doing them with people who aren't a part of your friend group or your family or in your day-to-day life. And so, like, the people who you just mentioned aren't at a disadvantage, right? It doesn't matter that they have a small friend group. Like, we're all actually looking for somebody that's a little bit outside our friend group, outside of our realm, and that can be challenging. But some, the ways that Patty put out there are great ways to find a listening partner. But let's say that you aren't comfortable doing that, or don't do that for whatever reason, and you want to try it with someone you know. I would take the book. I would, pick a person, this friend, or perhaps your partner or somebody, and each read the chapter. And try it for a period of time. So just say, like, hey, let's experiment with this for a month, and then let's revisit. So you have an easy out. Right? Mm-hmm. And I think the things to pay attention to when you're trying to do this with somebody who is a little bit closer to you than is perhaps ideal is to be clear that you're going to make a mistake sometimes and break confidentiality, which is, we didn't talk about confidentiality, but one of the core tenets of listening partnerships, and one of the things that really makes them work is the fact that what gets said there or experienced there stays there. And that's what allows safety to build for us to work on our deeper, wounds and upsets that need to heal. So you want to agree with this person that you're not going to share anything that happens in there with anybody else, but you're also not going to bring it up to one another. And this is where the challenge comes in. It's not so much the challenge of, oh, that person went and said something to a friend that you both know, because presumably, if you're getting into this type of relationship with that person, you trust them and their ability to keep confidentiality. But the other piece of confidentiality is that we don't want to bring up what gets experienced or said in the listening partnership to the person themselves. So just let's say Patty and I are listening partners and we're having a listening partnership, and I am, crying and really upset about my father dying, and I'm having a lot of sort of abandonment stuff coming up and feelings, and I'm sharing and whatever. And then we see each other at, we chat because we're doing a podcast together. And so we talk to each other beforehand, and she says, oh, how are you doing with your, how are you doing with your dad's stuff? That's not appropriate, right? That's a breach of the confidentiality. It didn't come from a bad place. She didn't mean to. It came from a caring place, right? But because we have like this mixed relationship of we're listening partners, but we're also friends and business colleagues and all these things, sometimes we make mistakes. So I need to be able to say, that was listening partnership stuff. I don't really want to go there. And she'll say, oh, sorry, my bad. And we just move on.
Beautiful.
So you're going to make mistakes, but that's the challenge of doing it with people who are involved in your life, in your sort of closest circles. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, I do have a question, Patty and Tasha. One of the things that parents often struggle with is putting in limits. How do you recommend parents put in limits?
Like setting limits with their kids?
Setting limits.
Well, in the book, and and in everything that I think we both teach, we talk about a 3-step practice of listen, limit, and listen. And even before we go into that a little bit, what I want to say is that there's no one right limit to set. Like, most limits are gray. Okay, so there are the black and white limits, like hurting somebody, for example. But most of the limits: does your child need to get off their screen? What time is bed? Do they sleep with you, or do they sleep in their own room? I mean, like, all these things that we're struggling, what they eat, how they eat, when they eat, all these things, these are personal decisions. And I really want parents to be clear that, I've worked with tons of parents. Patty has worked with even more parents, and mostly all our kids turn out fine. If they sleep with us, if they don't sleep with us, if they eat their vegetables, if they don't eat their vegetables. But so there's not just one way to do it. It's more about how we do it. So when we talk about setting limits, it's really important for me that parents realize that they get to decide what's aligned with their values, what makes sense for them and their situation and their family. And then when we go into the listen, limit, listen, it's really important for parents to take that first listen, which is really about like listening to whether or not a limit needs to be set, whether or not I as a parent have the wherewithal to deal with the fallout of the limit, right? In other words, like, I get to set the limit. I could decide to set the limit, but I can't control how my child feels about it, right? So like, let's say, where the decision is like, can they have cake or can they not have cake? First of all, it might be different depending on the situation, right? If it's a school night and it's 8:00 at night and sugar wires your child and whatever, then maybe you would make a decision to say no. Maybe if you're in the park on a Sunday afternoon at somebody's birthday party, maybe you would make a decision to say yes. I don't know, but in either case, like, you don't have control over how your child feels. So in that first listen, which is happening, it's kind of like a scan the scene, right? Before you bring the limit, you want to think about, do I have the wherewithal to keep calm and loving and connected in the face of whatever feelings might come up for my child? Because in my opinion, I'd rather have you even have the kid eat the cake at 8 o'clock at night and be wired than you hold a limit and end up, yelling at that child and shaming that child and berating that child and punishing that child and feeling horrible about it when crying yourself to sleep at night. I'd rather they just ate the cake and went to bed, or didn't sleep for a night and we didn't pile in more hurt. So we want to really take time. And this is the step that parents skip. We don't take the time to scan the scene. So we need to think about that. Do I want to set a limit? Am I in emotional shape to be able to, again, handle the upset that might come as a result of that limit? And then, am I forgetting something about the listen piece, Patty?
No, I think that's clear.
Okay. And so then when we get to limit setting, we talk about bringing a limit. And this is important because a lot of parents think a limit is saying something like, go get your pajamas on. And it's like, the child's not getting their pajamas on. And so you say again, go get your pajamas on. Please go get your pajamas on. Like, go get your pajamas on already. I've told you 50 times, get your pajamas on, right? I like to say to parents, that's not a limit. That's kind of a pipe dream. You're throwing something out and it's not happening. If you were to say it once or twice and they were able to follow through, then yes. But if they're not able to follow through, then you need to acknowledge that more needs to be done if, in fact, this limit is an important one to you. And so bringing a limit is actually moving in with our bodies, right? So let's say the child is playing with their Legos and you're in the other room and you're saying, time to go, stop playing and go put your pajamas on, but it's not happening. So bringing a limit would look like you go into the room, you get down to their level, right? Because as mammals, we feel threatened when something or someone is hovering over us like this. And most of us are larger, or at least used to be, larger than our children, right? And so we want to get down to their level. We want to use a kind, loving voice, right? A limit isn't a punishment. This is one of the like biggest lies out there about limits. And I love my favorite things what Patty always said, what Patty taught me. Like she used to say, Patty, give limits, like set limits like you're giving a gift. And it's true. It is a big gift. It's not a punishment. So you would go in there, you get down low, and you might put your hand on the Legos they're playing with and say, hey, hey, sweet girl, time to get your PJs on now. And at that point, you're interrupting the play because you've already sort of tried from the other room to say, hey, go get your pajamas, go get your pajamas. This isn't a surprise. But right now you're coming in and you're kind of making stop happen. You're putting your hand on the Lego and you're saying, hey, sweet girl, time to get your PJs on. And then we move in to the third step, was listen. Then we brought a limit, right? We listened, we decided a limit was in order. In this case, it's time to move towards bed, time to stop playing. We brought a limit, we came in, we used a loving tone, we got down low, we made stop happen in the situation. And then the third step of listening is stay listening. It's the stay listening tool, where we don't pretend to have control over what our child feels about the limit. Instead, we devote ourselves to being present with whatever feelings come up for them, understanding that that's a healing practice, that if we are able to stay loving and kind and listen deeply as they get angry, I hate you, you never let me finish my Legos, all the things, like maybe they try to throw them or whatever, I'm not going to bed, everybody else gets to stay up later, whatever, all the things. But our staying in there, stay listening and staying loving and connected, just listening to the upset is the healing process. And like we talked about with play listening earlier, what we're going for is change over time. So oftentimes we get stuck in this like, well, this isn't working, right? Parents will say, well, it's not working. She's just getting mad. No. It's working. It's working. You're being clear about, what your limit is, what this rule is, what this limit is that you've decided, you've been thoughtful about making a decision about it being important to you and your family. You've implemented that. You've brought that limit, and you've created space for your child to have feelings about that limit. And what you're going to see over time if you're able to listen lovingly, is that you're going to see that the transition out of play and into sleep or whatever, or transitions in general, will start to go more smoothly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you're
That was a
I've got,
lot.
yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Patty.
I just have a really good anecdote about this exact thing, and that I want to tell. And that is, I taught these tools to my brother and my sister-in-law, and it's like put your pajamas on, and she's ignoring them, ignoring them, ignoring them, and they brought the limit, just like Tasha said, and she went running through the house crying into her bedroom where the pajamas actually had been laid out for her, and cried and cried and cried, and her mom came and listened to her, and she sweated and struggled and fumed and just very big emotions. And after a little while, after 15 minutes or so, my sister in law kind of picked her up and pulled her into her lap, and she fought and struggled and cried. And no, it's still time to put your pajamas on. And then she said, you're forcing me just like that boy forced me today. And her mom went, oh, what happened today? And she cried and cried and cried some more, and then told the story of a boy in her preschool, who she was 4 years old at the time, who wanted to kiss her, and she did not want to kiss him. And he chased her around. And she, got behind the gate, and then he pressed the gate up into her so she couldn't move, and kissed her forcefully. And no wonder she couldn't think before she went to sleep. All of that was, kind of percolating in her mind. And who can go to sleep when you've been kind of accosted like that, even if you're 4 years old? And so she cried, and her mom listened, and she cried and cried and cried and told the story, and then could finally settle and had clear eyes and could go to sleep. And in the morning, the mom said, are you ready to go back to school? I think we need to let your teacher know what happened yesterday. And she said, do you want me to tell her, or do you want to tell her? And she just woke up bright, shiny. Oh, mom, I'll tell her. You hold me and I'll tell her,
Oh.
And she felt like fully in charge. They went in, they told the teacher. The teacher apologized for that having happened. And she went off to play without a worry about that boy, about that happening again. It's like she really had recovered entirely. And yeah, it took a half an hour, but way better than saving it for 20 years and then having that sit there when you're trying to have a safe and loving relationship with a boyfriend.
I think this is such a good point. Is parents, we personalize, right? We personalize behavior, we personalize the emotions, and we forget that kids have had all these experiences that week that we weren't around for.
Yeah.
And all of these things have happened. And kids, just because of how they process information, don't always have the words. And they may not tell you it happened, but it's accumulating. And once they're with you, that's like when they come home from school and they have that big eruption, is they finally have some place safe to put it. And we forget what an honor that is. It's exhausting, but it's an honor to hold that space for them because they've just had all. And so often it's not about us. There's been all these other things that have happened. And it was when you set the limit that allowed that the stay listening as you say no to something. And then all of the emotions that accumulated throughout that day or that week or that month come to the surface. And it's not that you're a bad parent. Your child just needed that limit. It's the floodgate opened, and our job then is to just hold space.
Yeah. There was one little boy that came to a play event that I did, and fortunately there were two of us leading, and his mom told me ahead of time she brought him because this 3-year-old was going to be kicked out of his preschool for aggressive behavior. He was just kind of so out of line that they didn't feel like they could handle him anymore. And he came and looked inside at children playing on pillow fighting around and playing on these tumbling mats, and didn't want to come in, and was really like and clung to his mom. And so I just paid attention. I said hi. I didn't run up to him or anything. I just watched while that happened and became a listener. And then he walked in, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you. You need to take off your shoes before you come in so you don't step on somebody's toes. And he went back out and he was like, who was this lady talking to me? And his mom helped him take his shoes off. And as he took his second shoe off, he threw it in the classroom. And there was nobody else, including me, that was within 5 feet of where he threw his shoe. It's like it wasn't dangerous. I could have let it go. But that was a sign that he was not feeling good. So I just picked up the shoe and I brought it back to him very gently. I said, here's your shoe. We don't, could you put it down, please? We can't have shoes coming into the classroom like that. And he burst into tears and he cried and he screamed and he kept saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. And I supported his mom. His mom fortunately listened to him, and it went on for quite a long time. And meanwhile, there's all this other fun stuff happening in the background for the other kids, but he was wanting to go home in the worst way. And that was his main phrase the whole time. And as we just said, you're going to go home, but not yet. This is a safe place for you. It's not a safe place. And finally, before the play event was over, he kind of, had cried enough that he could look around and see what was going on and watch the other kids for a while. And I said, if you're ready to play, we can do that. You did a good job. It was really good to listen to you. And he did get up and walk around and play just a tiny bit, and then it was time to go home. And as he was leaving, he sort of said goodbye, holding his mommy's hand. And then he looks up at her and he says, Mommy, I have 2 homes now.
Oh.
I have home, and this is my home too. His whole perception of the world and how safe he is away from home had changed in that one huge cry.
Oh, so
that
beautiful.
Where 2 people were listening, and really with the thought in mind of, you're safe and we're so glad to listen to you. Sorry all of this bad stuff got caught inside you. We're here. You can let it go.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah.
I think we're ready for rapid
fire, and then we'll.
So we'll ask Patty, then Tasha, then Patty. So we'll do one each.
One each. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So these are just our very quick questions. Tasha, what is the worst parenting advice you've ever heard?
The worst parenting advice I've ever heard. Gosh, I think I'd have to go with punishing your child when they are struggling. Yeah.
It's a good one.
Okay. And Patty, we're doing the second one, what is the best parenting advice you've ever heard?
Parenting is emotional work, and you deserve emotional support while you do it.
Yeah.
Takes a
Find
village.
someone who can listen to you. Yeah. Build a support system for yourself, and everything will go better.
Beautiful. And then maybe they both can answer this one. Other than each of you have wonderful organizations, which we'll cite again here momentarily. What is one of your favorite go-to resources that you send parents to other than your own organizations? Could be a book, website.
I'll go. Dr. Lawrence J., I think it is, Cohen, PhD, has written the book Playful Parenting, which is a wonderful book. But my favorite book of his is The Art of Roughhousing, because what we see is that children who are regularly roughhoused, both boys and girls, and children whose parents don't stop roughhousing with them when they get to be 10 or 11, the wrestling on the living room floor that happens every night after dinner keeps on going through the teen years. Those children wind up being very capable leaders. It's like their social emotional instincts are honed and good and accurate, and they wind up being real doers, real authentic people who make the world a better place because they know who they are, and they've they've had a chance to try all kinds of things without shame or blame.
Oh, that's great.
That was the number one book that was stolen when I used to give presentations in person before COVID. I'd bring all my favorite books to these auditoriums and I would go for lunch break and sometimes forget to put books back in the suitcase. I had to repurchase that book at least 8 times. It was the number one book parents would steal. So that's a funny story
That's
about.
hysterical.
Yeah, that's the book that would go missing the most.
And you, Tasha, what's yours?
Can I do 2?
Yeah.
Okay, so Mercedes Samudio has a book called Shame Proof Parenting,
Yeah.
which I just think is great because we aren't kind enough to ourselves as parents, and we often feel guilty for how we behave and also for how our children are behaving as if it's our fault. And she just addresses that beautifully. So I love that. And then I also love Mona Delahook's new book, Brain Body Parenting. And I think it's great. I don't think it's necessarily like the book for, parents, the how to in the moment, although it has some of that too. But what I really love about it is that a lot of parents are a little bit suspicious about, peaceful parenting or hesitant to get rid of the punishments and punishment and reward systems, even though they see they're not working. And what this book does is gives you a really solid brain-based sort of understanding of what's going on inside your child when they're struggling and why it makes sense to respond in all the ways that we've been talking about responding.
Beautiful. And I'd just like for everyone to know that if you're listening to our podcast, we have interviewed Mercedes on her book, Shame Proof Parenting. It would be episode 4. And Mona Dr. Delahook is coming up for a future, but we are interviewing her next month. So both of these, and Dr. Lawrence Cohen is, as well as the two of you, are guest speakers for our membership. You guys have done workshops for us. So basically, we wholeheartedly agree that they are people we love. We love
you
these
are
people
so
as well.
plugged in. You are so plugged in.
Well, and it's thanks to people, Lawrence. The reason I know who Lawrence Cohen is because of you, because I think you guys you mentioned him in your book, and so we discovered him, and I love his book on anxiety for kids.
He's got a new one coming out. Actually, we're interviewing him in February.
Oh, we're interviewing Lawrence, so there you go. He will also be on the podcast in February.
Patty and Tasha, thank you so much for your time today. For anybody who wants to find out more, there's so much more on both of the websites that we have. So it's handinhandparenting.org, or you can head over to parentingboyspeacefully.com. Please get a hold of Patty and Tasha's book. It's fabulous. It's called Listen, and it can be found on Amazon.
Yeah, and probably plenty other places. So thank you so much. We've always enjoyed working with you guys, and we'll just keep recommending your book, especially parents with little ones. It's so revolutionary in terms of raising kids who are compassionate and kind and just really connected to their caregivers. So thank you so much.
I have to put a plug for older ones too, because it works really well for older kids too.
The usefulness does not die out as they.
It does not die out.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I feel honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.